Start recording. Okay, so what we're going to do in this practical lecture is we're going to show you the basics of how to get up and running with the Java JDK. Now, more than that, we're going to show you how to work with command line, which you do have experience with in Computer Science 1B and 1A, but we're going to show you in how to use it with different applications. So we're going to have a look at command line interfaces, mostly with Windows. Anyone here use anything but Windows? Any Linux people here? Unix? Mint? Ubuntu? Anyone? No? Any Apple fanboys here? Fangirls? Fan people? One? So you have a Mac at home, a Mac computer at home. All right, so those of you who have other devices, some of these things will not work for you. And that reason for that is you don't have the same operating system, and obviously I can't teach you 12 different operating systems in the same amount of time. I can teach you one. So some of the commands might be different, but the overall concepts will be the same. So what we're going to have a look at is just look at command line interfaces. What are they? How can we use them? And more specifically, what we're going to look at is working with batch files. And the reason why batch files are important, they basically allow us to run a set of commands at the same time. So we can have a number of things all running sequentially, or depending on what we're trying to do, run in alternating order depending on what task we are tasked with trying to execute. What's wrong? What's wrong? I see people raising their hands. What's the problem? Can't hear. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. You can't hear that. I fixed it. The best thing I can do for the people in that venue that can't hear the audio is you probably can hear the audio better on Blackboard Collaborate. That's the only thing I can do for you now. That sorted out again, it's going to take too much time and I won't be able to finish the practical lecture. I'll try and get it sorted out, but I'm a lecturer, not a maintenance worker. Okay, so there was some issues with people not being able to hear. So if you're having audio problems in the actual computer labs, the best thing to do is go onto Blackboard and look at the lecture there. Hopefully everything is working properly there. Seems like everyone is fine on that side. So with command line interfaces, we first have to understand what is a command line interface, or sometimes known as command line interpreters. So command line interfaces, sometimes known as terminals. So in the Unix world, they talk about terminals quite often. And that's a way to control a computer system through a textual interface. So you don't have a graphical user interface. What you use right now in front of you is a graphical user interface. You have things you can see, you can click on them, you can right click, depending on context menus, you can right click, left click. If you're working on a phone, tap, double tap, zoom and pinch with your fingers. All of these things are visual access to an operating system. But terminals are text-based. Text-based can only understand textual input. So command line interfaces are actually quite old. They go back to the beginning of computers, because when what we understand as a modern day computer came out, everything was done through a command line interface. There was no graphical user interface. You wanted to do something, you had to type in commands for the computer to do. And if you didn't type the command correctly, the computer didn't know what you wanted, and it just sat there doing nothing. You only had one program at a time, only one application. So if you think about it right now, on the device that you are viewing, either on the projector or the machine in front of you, how many applications are running right now on that machine? If you say one, that's wrong. Definitely not. Because you might have the application like a browser open, you might have an application like a PDF viewer open, you might have other things running in the background. You have, if you're working on Windows, you have the Explorer running, you have all the tasks associated with running Windows, all of those services that are running. If you connect to the network, you have a network task that's running. All of these things are running all the time. But way back when, everything was just one program and one program only. And the way you talk to it was through a command line interface. So with a command line interface, you need to tell the computer what to do. And the way it does this is you have something called a prompt, which will tell you what sort of mode you are operating in. Then you have the command which you want to process. So you'll say the name of the program you want to execute. And then you have a list of parameters that you want to pass to that specific command. Sort of like how when you ran your executables in Computer Science 1, you could pass arguments to your program. Similar kind of concept. You can pass arguments now to any sort of command on a machine, depending if you know the actual commands that are available. So let's have a look at a few commands which are going to be useful when we get to working with batch files and working with the JDK. So with CLI, depending on the operating system, these commands do change, but they usually provide a set of basics. So you have things like working with navigation. You can navigate to a specific file or folder. You can work with the current directory as your working directory. You can create new directories. You can delete. You can copy. All of these different concepts you can apply to whichever operating system you're working with. As I said already, we're going to be working with Windows primarily in these labs. So I'm going to discuss the Windows aspects of these different commands. So with these different commands, that's just what the operating system provides. You can have additional programs that you install that will have other commands available. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to have other commands that are available that we're going to be using to compile our Java source code into bytecode and then run that compiled bytecode to run our Java program. So on Windows, the prompt that we have there, the command line interface that we have, is called command prompt. And CMD is what is usually used. There is another one called PowerShell. PowerShell is something that Microsoft released in the past few years, and it's sort of like the next version of command prompt, but because of historical reasons, they cannot get rid of the old version because it's built into Windows from a very long time ago. And that is the DOS prompt. So command prompt is your DOS prompt, and DOS is a disk operating system. It's the operating system that existed before Windows existed. So if you have a very old machine or you have family that have a very old machine, there was no Windows interface. You had switched the computer on, and the first thing you get is the command prompt. And when you run an application, a game, or whatever it is, that's the only thing that ran. When you exit it, you go back to your DOS prompt. So because of legacy reasons, it's available inside of Windows as well. And because the command prompt can do a lot of things which you cannot do very quickly or easily inside of graphical user interface. Now to access the command prompt, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can either go to the start menu. So if you press the start button and you type in CMD, it should pop up with something that says command prompt. And if you press enter, that will open up that specific command prompt. Now that will open up the command prompt in its default format. Then you have a way you can open up in the File Explorer, so Windows File Explorer. You go to a specific folder, you type in CMD in the address bar, and that will open up command prompt to work inside of the folder where you're currently browsing. And then the last one is to use the context menu. So context menu is a right-click menu. Right-click menu, you can then open up command prompt that way as well. So just to show you the different ways. So here you can type in CMD, and there you can see there's the command prompt. I'm not going to press enter because I have some other things open here, and that might open up in a different location. So you might see this doesn't look like the command prompt you might see on your screen. It's a little bit greener, and it might have, if you look here, it also has a way to open up multiple tabs. And the reason why I have this is because I do a lot of command prompt work, and I need to have multiple tabs for multiple reasons. You won't have it on your machine, perfectly fine. What I'm teaching you is not trying to use this other software, so don't worry too much about that. What you might also see is that I have another um, sort of tab thing called Windows Terminal, which is something newer from Windows as well, also has a tab interface. So this is where I'm going to show you the stuff. And the reason why I want to show it in here is because it has a nice way to increase the font size without me doing too much work. All right, so the last way I said is by using the context menu. So here, so let's just try the other one. So this is typing CMD in the address bar. And you can see it opens up in that folder. So you can see I'm working in that specific folder there. And then the last one was the context menu. So if you hold on, if you do right click and you have these applications installed, you can see they open in terminal preview. Or if you hold on shift and you right click, then you should be able to see the other options there. Now, because I have these other programs installed, I don't have more options specified here. Okay, so one other thing I just want to mention is when you're typing something in the command prompt and you have a file name, you have a directory you want to go to, you can use the tab key to autocomplete certain things. So if it's a file name, you can press the tab key and it will autocomplete for you. So you don't have to type out long file names. You can use the tab key to assist you with certain things. It doesn't help you with everything, but it does give you access to working with that when you're doing a directory with a lot of files. So here we're going to have a look at some navigation commands. So you'll see there's going to be some commands here which might look a bit weird. They have a weird syntax, but we're going to discuss all the different syntax that is involved here. So with this examples inside of the slides, you'll see that I am currently working on the C drive in a folder called Computer Science 2A and inside a folder called Workspace. That's where I'm currently working. And to check that, if you have a command prompt open and you want to check that, you can use a special command called echo. Echo just says whatever you put as a parameter back to the command prompt. But in this case here, we're going to put a special parameter. And the special parameter is called CD, so current directory. And you see it has these two percentage symbols there that indicates a variable of sorts inside a command prompt. It's not in a variable in the sense that you know programming languages variables, so it's not a C++ variable, but it's as close as an equivalent inside of a command prompt. If you want to work on a different drive, so you have multiple disk drives installed in your machine. So either you have a hard disk or a solid state drive. So you want to change to a different drive, you can just type in the drive letter followed by a colon and press enter. It will change the directory that you're currently working in to a different directory being on that drive. So the example there, you'll see something called T drive. And if you are in the computer labs, you should, I'm not saying this with 100% certainty right now, but I can double check, you should have a T drive. So when you're working on the lab machines, the T drive is a place where if the computer restarts, everything there is lost. And the reason why we would say work on the T drive is if you're working on the T drive and you're done with your assignment, you're done working with the practical, you can restart that machine and know that that T drive is clear. There's nothing else going to be on there. Otherwise, if it's on the desktop or it's somewhere else and someone else gets access to that machine, then someone else can take your practical, and that's not something that we want to happen. So T drive, if you're working on the computers in the university labs, T drive is the place where if it restarts, it will be there, but you need to make sure you clear out the stuff that you don't want afterwards. If you want to change to a specific directory, absolutely, you can use the CD as a command itself, change directory or current directory, which will modify it to be something else. And if you need to change the subdirectory, you can either type in the name of the subdirectory or an absolute path. When we say absolute path, it means you specify exactly where that thing is. C drive, computer science 2A, and then workspace. Or if you just want to go to workspace, but you're already inside computer science 2A, you just specify CD workspace. And if you want to go to the parent directory, there's some extra special parameters being used there. You'll see a double dot. A double dot means go to your parent directory. So when you're working with files and folders on your computer, you know you have folders and you can make folders inside of folders. If you want to go one level up, you can use double dot. If you want to work in the current directory, you use the single dot. So it does specify that on the next slide. If you're working with folders that have special characters or they have spaces, you have to put that file or folder in quotation marks. So if your path has spaces, or if you have something with special characters, rather put it inside of quotation marks. Otherwise, when the command line looks at it, it interprets those things as separate parameters. So you have to make sure you put your quotation marks, otherwise you'll run into problems. And as I said already, you do have current directory as a single dot, parent directory as double dot, and then something we'll be using in just a moment is an asterisk character, which represents a wildcard character. And that's something we'll talk about more in detail when we get to strings and regular expressions later in the term. Now, with most command line programs, there is a way to get help. Now, it's not going to be help in the sense that you're going to get a website that you can browse and click on links. You're going to get help in the same place you asked for help, in the command prompt. So let's have a look at a command. So inside of this folder, what I'm going to type is a command called dir, and that will give me a directory listing of the current directory. So type in that command and press enter. Now it's going to give a couple of pieces of information here. You can see it specifies a volume. So volume in drive E. So it's my E drive, specific volume. That volume has a serial number. It tells me the directory which I'm working in. And then it lists a couple of things afterwards. It lists a single dot for the current directory, lists a double dot for the parent directory, and any files or folders inside of there. Now, at this point in time, this folder is empty. You can see there is no files, and there's only the two directories, which are the current directory and the parent directory. So there's no other files or folders here. You'll also note it does list how much space this takes, and that's basically the information you get out of typing the command like that. Now you can type in the command with /?, and this will give you help on how to use this specific command. So if you press enter after you type in some commands, now not every single program uses a /?. Some of them use a -help, some of them use --help. All depends on the program you're using. But in this case here, you can see that dir does give you some indication of how to actually use it. So here it gives you extra parameters you can pass to your command. So things like /a, /b, /d, and each one of those things means something different. So you also notice that it says there at the bottom, press any key to continue. Where's the any key? Anyone? No one? Okay, I'll try pressing enter. So that will continue printing the rest of the information. So once it prints the rest of the information, you can see there's an option there that I'm going to try /W. So I'm going to type in the same command again, but I'm going to type in /W. Note that it gave similar output, but it changed the formatting because I passed an additional parameter to it. This is going to be important because when we start working with the JDK, when we start working with compiling a code or running a code, we need to pass extra parameters to the applications we are using via the command line to make sure these things are going to work correctly. So here are some commands which you can test out in your own time. Just make sure you know where you're testing it out before you do any of these commands, and you know what they do before you actually run them. So dir, directory listing, we've already seen how that works. There's also something called type. And then the other next two are going to be make directory, so it will make a specific directory. You can specify a directory name, or you can specify a full path to create a directory at a certain location. Now, the next few are going to be very, very important to take note what they do before you actually run them. And those are del for delete, rmdir for remove directory, and you can pass additional commands to del to delete an entire directory tree. Now, depending on whether or not you have admin access on the computer you're working with, some of these commands will not work in certain locations. However, some of them will work in other locations. So you don't want to make a mistake and try and use these commands on important files, especially with something like delete. Make sure that you are deleting things in a specific directory and not on your C drive. Because if you type delete on your C drive and it deletes everything, that's not going to be a good time for you. That being said, if you're going to run a batch file can contain any number of these commands. Make sure that you understand what the batch file does before you run the batch file. Because if you run it and you don't know what it does and it deletes half the files on your computer, that's on you. Not to say that I'm going to give you one of those batch files, but your friend might. Then the last three commands will have to do with moving and renaming. So move moves things, copies things, renames things. Now, there are, like I said before, equivalents available on other operating systems. So if you're working on Unix systems, ls for listing, that lists directories as opposed to using dir. So there are other equivalents on other operating systems. So we sort of went through a couple of commands, sort of looked at what parameters we can pass to commands or how to use them, and look at the parameter lists. What we're going to try and do now is look at trying to run a sequence of commands without me typing it all the time. It would become very tedious if I had to type every single one of these commands every single time I want to do something. Wouldn't it be nice that once I've tested a set of commands to be able to just run them in sequence? Sort of like writing a program. You don't want to write one line of code, test it, one line of code, test it, and then try to run each line of code separately to try and execute a program. You write a function that does all the things in one go and then just call that function. Now, batch files are something, again, from legacy systems where computers would need to execute programs in order, and you basically have a stack of cards, yes, physical cards that used to be printed, and you'd feed this into machines, and that used to be a batch of programs they need to run. And in banking, this is where it was used. You take that stack of cards of transactions, this person paid this person paid this person, and it would process in the evening. You just leave the stack of cards there. The computer would take it in, read them, and transfer the bank accounts appropriately. Nowadays, we do the same thing, except it's not a stack of physical cards, but a set of transactions sent across the internet. We still have a way to execute a set of commands sequentially, and that is through batch files. So batch files are basically text files, so they're files that you can read. They're not machine code or anything like that. And they have the .bat extension at the end. So very, very important that you have .bat at the end and not something like txt. Txt means it's a text file. BAT means it's a batch file. Very, very important when you're working on a Windows machine. Some useful commands inside of batch files. You'll see when we talk about batch files in a moment, we're going to show you an example of this. You'll see there's an @ symbol. An @ symbol basically stops output from happening. So if you type in change directory to C drive, it doesn't actually output that command when you run the batch file. Might be useful in certain circumstances. We will see that in a moment. Then we also have a command says @echo off. So that will stop the commands in the batch file from appearing. We'll have a look at that as well. And then there's a special command called pause, which indicates that you want the user to press a key before continuing on to the next set of commands. And then the last point there, which is better demonstrated than discuss it in a lecture slide, that's why it's not a very long section there, is we can set variables inside of a batch file. Now, the way we set variables in a batch file is very, very strict in terms of the rule structure, in terms of the amount of spaces you put, where you put spaces and where you do not put spaces. Otherwise, it will not work correctly. Okay, so we're not going to be doing the lecture anymore, so let's get rid of that. So I'm going to go back to my command prompt. And what I want to do in the command prompt is try and run a few commands. So one of the commands you can do to sort of clear up a screen, because there's a lot of stuff here at the moment, and I don't really need it anymore. You can type in clear screen, CLS, and that will clear your screen. All right. So that what I did right now was just to make sure that the next steps work correctly. So don't worry too much what I typed. So what we want to try and do is we want to try and work with the Java compiler, and we want to work with the Java runner. So the reason why we need two things instead of one thing like we did with C++, because we have a way to compile our code and then be able to run it on different machines. So we don't need to have to compile it for different machines. We can just take the compile code, give it to another person on a different operating system, and the code should run on there as well. So in order to do that, we need to have the Java JDK. Now, saying that, those of you who are on Blackboard, you will not have the Java JDK installed on your machine. If you are in the computer labs, you'll see on the C drive, there will be a JDK 17 folder. And inside the JDK 17 folder, there'll be a whole bunch of different folders there. And inside of there, there'll be a bin folder. And that's where the things we need exists. So because I am working on my local machine, my personal machine, I have it somewhere else, but we can make a plan. Okay, so inside the bin folder, you'll see there's a whole bunch of files, and one of these files is an executable. So there's Java, and there's Java C. So Java C is my compiler, and Java is the thing that we use to run programs. But at the moment, if I go to my command prompt and I type in any of those commands, so type in Java C on your machine right now, test out what happens if you run Java C. In the command prompt, open up a command prompt. I showed you how to do that in the slides. How do you open up a command prompt? Type in CMD, enter. Right, type in Java C. So you need to have a Java command prompt. So you need to have a command prompt open to type in Java C. So make sure that you open up a command prompt either via the start menu or by right-clicking in the context menu or by typing it in the address bar. And if you type in Java C, what you should see is Java C is not recognized. So it doesn't know anything about Java C. That's not good. How are we going to compile our programs if when we try and compile them, it doesn't know where to find the compiler? So what we need to do is tell the command prompt, where is this actual Java C existing? So, so we know where it exists. It exists in the C drive at JDK17. So if I go to the C drive, so there I changed directory, but I need to change the actual C drive as well. That's on my machine at least. So now I'm on the C drive, and I want to know where I need to go. I need to go to the bin directory. So you can see there I typed in dir, and I can see the bin directory over there. So go to my bin directory, and inside my bin directory, if I type in Java C now, it works. How do I know it works? Just like you did in Computer Science 1, when someone didn't pass command line arguments to your program, you gave them a way to say, hey, you need to pass these arguments. That's exactly what's happening here. You see a usage where it tells you you need to run Java C with options and a source file. So here's all the different options. You can see there it specifies a whole bunch of them. We're going to have a look at some of them, not all of them, but it's available. And the same thing if I type in Java here, because it's in the folder, I get access to it. And again, it will tell me these are the ways you can run it. So Java, Java-jar, Java-m, Java-modules. So all of these different things, this is the way I use the Java command prompt command line interface. So let's go back to my working directory where I would be, let's say, writing my practicals. So you can make this, oops, you can make this wherever you want to on your personal machines. If you're working on the lab machines, T drive. If you're working at home, obviously wherever you store your specific things. Here I'm working on my E drive in a folder called CSC02T, T for tutorials. And in here, what I want to do is I want to make a directory where I want to start writing my first program. Now, I could go into the folder, right click, new folder, or I can use the command which I just learned, make directory. And I want to make a directory called HW. Let's call it practical HW. It's a practical hello world. So I made the directory. How do I know it's there? If I type in dir, you can see it's there. So I can change to that directory. So here, I typed in the letter P and I press tab, and notice it typed the rest for me. All right, so I want to work in this directory. I'm going to have source code in here somewhere. I'm going to have my compile code here somewhere. I want to make sure I have all the things in the right places. So let's do something simple. Let's try and compile some code. Now, in order to compile some code, we need to have some code. But first, we need to fix this problem. So where is Java C found? Java C is on my C drive in JDK-17. And I need to tell the command prompt, this is where you look for stuff. How do I do that? How do I tell command prompt where to look? So on command prompt, there is a special variable already set. And this special variable is called path. So you can type this on your own machine. Remember, echo just prints out whatever you say afterwards. And in this case here, I'm printing out a special variable called path. And if you press enter, you're going to get a whole bunch of folders. These folders are where command prompt looks for executables. It looks for things to try and execute. And if you look in this list, this is obviously my machine, your machine will be a bit different. You might see something like, let's see if I can see where it is. So, okay, it was right at the end. There's mingw, which is something that you can use for compiling C++ code. So because I have that available on my machine, I can run that command here. So in this list, what we need to do is add to this list our Java path, our Java JDK path. If we do that, then command prompt will know where to find the JDK. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is okay, so we have some people trying to be smart here. That's good. But there's a reason why we don't do that. So those of you who are on Blackboard and you don't have the JDK on your machine, you can download it from that's right. So you can go to eve.uj.ac.za/resources/CSC, and it will give you a link to go to the website that will show you where to download it. On campus, you don't have a limit on the data you can use. So if you're on the UJ Wi-Fi, you don't have a data limit. So you can download this directly there. Obviously, we're not using code blocks in DIA, but this is for all the subjects. So if you click on this, it will take you to the website. And you will see there's different operating systems. If you are using Windows, there's the one you need. If you're using anything else, so if you're using Mac or using Linux, there's the things you need there. Make sure it's version 17, not anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that path now to our command prompt so that it knows where to find the stuff. Now, you can do, as pointed out in the Blackboard chat, something called setX. That's a permanent change to your path. And if you do this and it's wrong, it's a permanent wrong thing. So don't do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the correct way of setting up a Java JDK path. And what I mean by correct way is you can have multiple versions of Java installed, especially if your job one day requires you to have that. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to set, so you can type in capitals, you can type in lowercase, it's all up to you how you want to do that. We're going to set something called and this part has to be in uppercase, something called Java home. Java home basically indicates a special variable. Where does the Java JDK live? And in our case, and just for safety's sake, I'm going to put this in a quotation marks. So if you have it on a different drive, etc., that's perfectly fine. Just make sure that you have the correct path. Note, I'm not specifying the bin directory. I'm just specifying the JDK directory. So after I specify that, press enter. Did it work? Let's test. So echo the thing that I just created. And you can see it does say Java home is JDK 17. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the bin directory in Java home to our path. So again, this syntax is very important. When you type in set, one space, the name of the variable, no space, I repeat again, no spaces, equals, no spaces, and the thing you want to set it to. So in this case here, I want to set it to Java home slash bin. Now I don't want to set it just to that because that will erase all the other stuff that I had, and that's not something we want to do. I want to make sure that I append this with the other paths that I had. So that will make sure that I now have Java bin in conjunction with all my old path variable. So this whole thing that I had here. After this, what I should be able to do is type in Java C, and that should work now. So double check your path. So let's do this here, here, let's open up this again. Okay, so I'm going to do set again because I open up a new window. You'll have to do it again, and this is the reason why we want to do batch files, so we don't have to type this every single time. Okay, so that's setting the home, and then what I want to do is set my path, and my path is Java home slash bin, and make sure that we specify the old path at the end. Now if I do echo path, what I should see is the first thing in that list is that JDK home slash bin, and then I should be able to run Java C. What you can also do is just check that you're running the correct version. You type in Java C dash version, so you're passing a parameter to Java C, and it will tell you if it's the correct version. You can also test this with Java command as well. It will tell you it's running the right version. This is important if you're running multiple versions of Java. Not to say that you have to. You can. So for example, on my machine, if I type in Java C version, notice I'm running Java 1.8, not Java 17, because I have multiple versions of Java. Okay, so once you have Java C being able to be used, we can now compile some code. But in order to compile some code, we need to write some code. So inside the folder where I'm working, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file. Now, on your machine that's in front of you, you might not be able to see the .txt. It's very important that you get rid of that .txt, otherwise things will not work correctly. So inside of the ribbon menu at the top here, you can see a tab called View. Go to Options, change folder and search options. So View, Options, and then change. Oh, so yeah, you can just click on it also. You don't have to click on that arrow. Go to the View tab, and inside the View tab here, there is an option called Hide Extensions of Known File Types. It should be checked on. Tick it off. Then you should be able to see .txt. And the reason why we need to do this is when I rename this, I want to rename this to Java, and it will come up with that message that says, are you sure you know what you're doing? Do you want to change the file type? Otherwise, what will happen is you will be doing this, and that's not the correct thing. You want it to be .java, not .txt. Okay, so let's write a simple Java program so we can get something to compile. So on your machine, you should have something called Notepad++ installed. If you're in the computer labs, if you're not, I will update that resources page so you can download it on your own machine. But if you right click and you say edit with Notepad++, it will open up your file in Notepad++. And the reason why doing it this way is nice is that inside Notepad++, as opposed to something like Notepad, you have syntax highlighting. So it will highlight according to what you want to do. And just to verify, you can see there, it does highlight according to Java in this case here. Now with Java, we don't know the full syntax yet. We're still going to get to that. But there are some basic things which you might be familiar with. The first thing is that every single file in Java, there's only one. In C++, you had header files and you had CPP files, and then HPP files for the equivalent C++ header files. In Java, you only have one file to worry about, .java, nothing else. And inside of that file, there has to be a class. And that class has to be the same name as the name of the file. So what is my file name? Hello world. So what is the name of my class? Hello world. Now note here, I am putting the keyword public first because I want to make this class available to everyone. There is public, private, and protected inside of C++. In Java, just like C++, but we have a different way of specifying things. You have to qualify, meaning you have to type out first every visibility modifier. So in this case here, it's public, class, and then the name of the class which I want. Now in C++, what is the first method that is called in a program? So I heard one right answer. Anyone else? What is the first function called inside a C++ program? Main function. But which one? Because you can have in C++, you can have main, you can have main. So there's different mains that you can have. Inside of Java, there is only one main method. And there's only one way of writing it out. So public, because it's a public function. Static, that's something that we'll have to talk about a bit later. Main, the function name. Oh, sorry, I forgot something. Void, doesn't return anything. And it takes a string array of arguments. Notice here, string with a capital S. We didn't hash include or anything like that. We're going to see what the equivalent of that is when we get back to the lectures, but there isn't anything like that to include. It's built into the language. And that should be, I say should because I haven't run the code yet, I haven't compiled the code, but that should be the main method. How do I output something inside of a Java program? So in C++, you had cout for your standard output stream. In Java, you have something called system out, which is your standard output stream. And you want to write something there so you can print, and then ln is print line, so it'll print it and then go to the next line. And whatever you type inside of here as a parameter, as a string, will be what is typed out on the command prompt. Okay, so that should be a simple program. Should. Reason why I say should is apart from Monday, the last time I wrote Java code was last year. So I'm not sure if this works. Are you sure? Anyone? No. You only way you can be sure is ask the compiler to compile your code, and it will tell you if it's right or wrong. So let's do that. So Java C, please compile for me hello world.java. No, I did not type that fast. I pressed tab. So Java C, and then the file is in that folder. Compile this file for me, please. If it ran and there's no messages, it's right. Everything worked. However, if you make spelling mistakes and you forget certain things, then it will tell you things are not exactly right here. When you see an error message, what do? Read. Because that tells you what is wrong with your program. So what does it say here? Line 5 in hello world.java, it's expecting a semicolon. So line 5 at the end here, it wants a semicolon. That does not mean we fixed all the problems. That means we fixed the problem it's complaining about. Try again. Oh, there's something else here. First problem, line 1, class hello q world is public, should be declared in a file called helloqworld.java. It's complaining that the name of your class does not match the name of your file. Make sure it matches. Notice the syntax doesn't say, please name your class like this. It tells you it in this language. That's how the Java C compiler works. Next problem here, cannot find symbol voted. So it doesn't understand what this is. So it's a typo. You can see here it's a typo because if I write it correctly, the syntax highlighting will highlight this with the correct color. Now, if you're using Notepad, obviously that won't highlight for you, but you can still try and look and see what is the problem. And the reason why I'm putting emphasis on reading these error messages is when you're writing code, the first person you should ask of what to do is the compiler. Compiler will tell you what is wrong. Don't come and ask me, don't ask an assistant, ask the compiler. If you don't understand the message, make sure you read. Go and check. Line 1, what is it complaining about? Line 3, what is it complaining about? If you have 200 lines of code and it complains about 50 lines of code, go and read the error messages. Go and see what it says. Now, I can already hear the shouts and screams. When are we using an IDE? I miss code blocks. Anyone? Who misses code blocks? Who wants to use an IDE? No one? Wow. I think 1 or 2 hands. Good. Okay, we'll program in Notepad++ the whole semester. Oh, now you want to change your mind. Okay. So when you get these error messages, whether you're using an IDE or not, make sure you read them and then try and solve the problem yourself. Because if you ask your friend and your friend helps you out, okay, they helped you out a little bit, no problem. If your friend is writing code for you, that's a different type of problem called plagiarism. But is your friend going to be there when you're writing your test? They'll be sitting somewhere in the same venue, but they're not going to be sitting next to you giving you answers. You're going to have to figure out how to do these things yourself. And then I can already see some people saying, can't I go to Stack Overflow? Yes, you can. Just make sure you copy the code from the answer, not the question. But again, Stack Overflow is not going to be there to help you out every single day. We're trying to teach you how to program, and that requires you to actually read and learn, not just go to a website and get all the answers which you think are correct. All right, so we have a program. We have compiled. What does that mean? If you look in the folder, what you will see is we now have something called hello-world.class. Class file is a compiled piece of Java code. If I try and open this file, does this make sense? It has some funny symbols. It has some other funny symbols. It has things I can sort of see: Java lang object, Java lang system out, print stream, hello world. I can see things I can recognize in my program, but I have no idea what's going on. This is compiled now to bytecode. This is Java bytecode. It needs to run on the Java virtual machine. How do you get it to run on the Java virtual machine? We use Java. So Java, what it wants, if we go back to the usage message, it wants the name of the main class, not the .class file. It wants the name of the main class. So let's ask Java, please run hello world. And it ran. It printed out a message, hello world. Okay. Let's go and delete this file. Let's say I made some changes. I want to make sure I get the changes correctly. Try and run it now. Can't, because it doesn't see a class file that has hello world inside of it. It doesn't know what that it should do with that. If we have a situation where we don't write the correct main here, so let's, for example, take that out. So again, we have to compile our code first before we run. Compile fine. Notice it compiled fine. There's nothing wrong with the code we have written. However, if we try and run, it says it cannot find a main method. It tells you exactly how the main method should look. So if you don't write the main method correctly, it will tell you can't find it because there's only one way you can write the main method. Okay, so we sort of have a way now to compile my code and run my code. Let's try and do this in a more automatic fashion. So what we're going to do is start working with batch files. We're going to run those commands sequentially in order to do exactly what we did now. Compile our code, run our code. But we have to do one step in between. And that one step is to make sure that we are following good coding practices and good coding convention. So this is your practical assignment that's due on Friday. There's always going to be certain sections to your practicals. It will have the information at the top, when we gave it to you, when it's due, tell you how many marks it's worth. It will always have this information at the top, always, always, always. It will tell you you should submit onto Eve before the due time. And in certain circumstances, so just making sure that you know how to read this. This is a footnote mark. So where's the footnote? Down here, number 1. If there's something that goes horrendously wrong, so we have load shedding and the generators fail here at UJ, or there's load shedding for the ones who are, yeah, that only has to be on UJ because everyone has to be on UJ. So if the generators fail on UJ and you don't have a way to access Eve to submit your practical, then we'll extend the submission. We'll make an announcement on Eve for that. Otherwise, if there's no announcement, that's going to be the due time. No exceptions. If you come to me at 1 minute past the submission time, no go. You have to do your practicals yourself. It does say that here, but as well, you know, the university has a plagiarism policy. We at the Academy of Computer Science and Software Engineering will have a plagiarism policy. You must follow working on your own, not collaborating with students on your practicals. Other things we'll have a look at is proper coding convention. So this is a guide. There's not only one coding convention in the world. This is a guide for doing one type of coding convention. You will see as I lecture you, I'll have my own style of coding, but it will be consistent. Mr. Situngu will have his own style of coding, but it will be consistent. You can choose your own style as long as it's consistent and readable. I have seen in the past where someone decided that this is how they should write their programs. So would you like to read code like this that's 200 lines long? Because remember, one day you will be working in a team, or if you're working with friends, or if you're working at a company, you're going to have to read someone else's code. If you want to read nice code, write nice code. So make sure that you follow good coding practices, which I will show you some of them. You can read that document as well, provided at that link. And there's also something called Java documentation. You don't have to worry about this until next week. Next week's practical lecture, I will teach you how to do Java documentation. There's a special type of documentation available in Java itself. Then the last thing here is there's a reminder page. So you'll have your practical. We'll look at this in just a moment. Then there's a reminder page. And on the reminder page, it tells you exactly how to submit your practical. You must follow this naming convention. Surname, initial, student number, subject code, year, practical number. Have to. So for example, if your surname is Berners-Lee, your initials are TJ, that is your student number, this is the module code, this is the year, this is the practical, this is your folder which you create. Okay, so I'm in that folder right now. And then next thing is, what folders do you need? Now this is going to be important. You have to have 3 folders: bin, docs, source. The last 2 are going to be optional depending on the practical you are doing. In your bin folder, that's where your compile code will be, all your class files. When you submit, this should be empty. Why should it be empty? Because your batch file will run the commands to compile your code and fill it into the bin folder. Your docs folder, that will contain the batch file. And in the future, you're going to do some UML. So we're going to do some UML class diagrams. Not for today, not for practical 0, but in the future. And it has to be in PDF format. I don't want a .df file. I don't want a .x file. I don't want a picture. I want a PDF. It has to be a PDF. And that PDF, you have to make sure your details are at the top of the PDF. So your surname, initial, student number has to be at the top of that PDF file. We'll talk about generated Java doc when we get there, so don't worry about that section for now. And then source, this is where your source code will go. Any source code that you write at the top of the file in a comment, you have to put your details. So at the top of this file, you will put your details. We will learn how a better way of doing this when we learn about Java tags, but for now, this is the way you do it. Write it at the top, student number, surname, initials. Every single file that you create has to have that information. And as I said already, data, when it becomes relevant, that will contain data needed for your application, and lib, that will be library files that will be relevant to your solution. All right, so make sure you have those folders. So let's go and make those folders in this practical. So I'm going to attempt to do practical 0. So here I need to make sure I have a bin folder, a docs folder, and a source folder. Okay, so in my source folder, this is where I'm going to have my file which I need. So I'm not going to do your practical for you. I think that's the name of the class you need to do. So all I'm going to do is make it a hello world program for now, because obviously you need to do your practical. Now what we're going to try and do is we need to compile this file here and put this compile code in here and then run it. That's what we want to do. That's what we're going to do in the batch file. So inside my docs folder, this is where I'm going to create my batch file. And for the batch file, again, we're going to create a new text file and rename it to the appropriate thing. We're going to call this build.bat. So it will build your project. Don't double click. If you double click, it's going to run the batch file. Right click and edit in whatever program you want. I'm going to use Notepad++ still. So in Notepad++, in the build.bat, what I'm going to do is try and do the things which are already done. What's the first thing I did when I tried to run Java C? It didn't work because it couldn't find it. So what do I need to do first? I need to set Java home. Now, if you're working on a machine at home, this will obviously be different, this path. You can keep it at CGDK17, that's perfectly fine. That will mirror what we have here in the labs. But this is the one place where it will change depending on where you are running that. Okay, so that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did was set the path, and the path was Java home. Put this here. We're getting some highlighting to show us that it's now a variable, so that's nice. Okay, and at this point in time, what we should be able to is run Java C version. So that's all I'm going to do in my batch file for now, just to make sure everything is working correctly when I run my batch. So I'm not going to run my batch file by double clicking on it. And the reason for that is it opens a window and then closes it at the same time. Let me just close these other windows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go navigate to that directory. You can open up a new command prompt to go there if you want to. So obviously that will be your details there. And my batch file is in my docs directory. I can confirm this by typing dir, and I should see my batch file over there. Now, if I type in build.bat, press enter, what will happen is it will print out a whole bunch of information. and then it will print out Java C version. Notice it does print out everything inside of that batch file. There it sets Java home, so it's printing out the command that prints out sets home. Then it sets the path. Here it did expand the path already. That's why you see it's already specified here. And then the last thing in my batch file was running Java C version. And you can see that there. Now, if we don't want it to spit out all this information every single time, we just want to see the output of what gets run. You can do one of the commands which we saw in the lecture slides, which was echo off. And if you run your batch file now, it just prints out whatever gets printed out from the commands that are run. So you can put that in if you want to. You can also put a comment inside of your batch file with remark. So this will essentially write a comment. You can see it's highlighted differently, similar to what you'll see in writing comments inside of code here. Same way you write comments as in C++. So you can see that's going to be a comment. So if I comment it out and I run my batch file, obviously it will go back to what we were using before. Now, one thing I would like to do is add here a pause. And what this will do is when my program runs, it will wait for me to press the any key again, and then it will wait at that point in time. So now, if I mistakenly double click on my batch file, you'll see it will run and it will wait for me to carry on. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to try and compile our source code. So where is our source code? Our source code lives in the source folder. Where is the source folder? Source folder is one level up. Can you see where this is going? One level up in source. And we want to put the compile code in bin. So we could do a whole bunch of commands like cd, go to parent directory, cd, go to source. That's a lot of work. Because then I have to go cd, go somewhere else. It takes a while to do all of these different commands. What we could do is we could set up some variables inside our batch file to reference the correct folders. So I'm going to leave this Java C version just to test and make sure that I am running Java C correctly. I'm going to go to the parent directory, and then I'm going to set up a couple of special variables. Frank bin. From where I currently am, so I'm in the docs folder, I go one level up, I'm now in my project folder. Frank bin is located at the current folder /bin. Again, notice there's no spaces here. Frank source is /source. And then frank doc is /docs. So now I have a couple of folders which I can use in the commands which I want to run. So I'm still sitting in the situation where I'm trying to run Java C against a class file that's in my Java file that's in my source folder. So let's see if Java C has any options available that can assist us. So if I type in Java C, you'll see there's a whole bunch of options. So you can go and read all these different options yourself. I'm not going to go through every single one of them. Things that might be interesting in the future, you notice there's something here called class path. If I carry on going down, there you can see there's help. So --help or --. I mentioned that not all programs do the /?. Some of them do dash. There's something about modules. There's something about warn. Okay, let's see if there's anything else. Oh, wait, here's something here. Source path. Specify where to find source files. That's useful. That's something I can use. So we can tell Java C your source path. Remember here it says double dash, so make sure we do double dash here as well. Your source path is track source. So we're telling it where the source is. Now this is going to be important when we have more than one source file, because the next thing we need to do is we need to specify what we're actually trying to compile. So it might seem a little bit redundant that we now have to say go to the track source folder and compile wildwest.java. So let's see if this works. Always test to see if something works before you carry on. I'm going to run my batch file, and it looks like it did. It gave me all these different things again. Maybe I want to exclude something like this here from filling up my screen because there's too much information there. So Java C ran, it does all of these different things. We can see that Java C, there's the output. Go back up a directory. You can see there now the prompt is working in my project folder. It sets the prac bin, sets the prac source, sets the prac doc. Then we have Java C source path is /source. That's perfect. We want to compile WildWest to Java. Perfect. It's complaining that there's some errors in my source code. So probably something that I typed incorrectly. Let's go and double check here. It says on line, I can see the problem already. So it says here on line 3, we're missing a bracket, and that all the other errors afterwards sort of become superficial because the first problem there is somehow I deleted this bracket. So now what you'll notice is after my batch file ran, I'm in the wrong folder. I'm now back in my project folder when I ran my batch file from my docs folder. So one thing I maybe want to change here is after my batch file is done, I want to go back to my docs folder just to make sure that whoever ran this goes back to the same folder they came from. Okay, we can try and run again. So I have to go back to my docs folder, run my batch file, and it looked like it ran correctly. The problem that you'll see is it put the class file in the same place as the source file. And we said that we want our class files to go in our bin folder. So there might be something else that Java C can tell us. So one of the options that we can see here, which I glanced over earlier, is -d directory, specify where to place generated class files. That's exactly what we're looking for. Let's use it. So I want to specify that generated class files should go in my prac bin folder. So now if I run my batch file, and even if I run it from double clicking over here, so you can see it runs the wrong Java C. Okay, that doesn't work. Let's not do that. Okay, so here you can see it runs the correct version of Java C, runs our thing specifying where to put the compile code, and we should see in the bin folder we indeed have a class file there. So the last thing now to do is just run my Java. We're in Java Runner, Java JVM. Again, we're going to look at the command line options available for Java to see if we can do something similar with it. And here we can see there's something called class path, specify where to search for class files. And that's exactly what we want. So here we're going to say class path. Was it one word or two words? Can be. So it can be single dash class path or double dash class dash path. So either one is fine. That's not what I wanted. So here I'm specifying my class path is going to be my bin directory. And what do I want to run? I want to run this class here. Remember, we don't specify .class or anything like that. We want the name of the class to run. And hopefully, if I run this batch file now, what we should see is hello world. Okay, so that gets you most of the way through your practical. So create commands to reference the right folders, add the JDK to your path, do Java C correctly, do Java correctly. Only thing I haven't told you how to do is point number 5. That's something for you to figure out. I showed you the steps how to figure it out. You need to figure out on your own. And then obviously you need to do the actual practical itself. Now, I haven't taught you a lot of syntax for Java because there isn't really much difference in the normal elementary Java syntax. You can have a look at practical lecture, sorry, not practical lecture, normal lecture 1 for some syntax. But if you want to do if statements, so very straightforward. If you want to do for loops, and obviously you need to check if the source code actually compiles. So one problem, oops, what did I mess up there? So I forgot to initialize this. And there you can see it prints out stuff mostly correct. There's some formatting errors. Okay, so that's where I'm going to end off today's lecture. I do apologize for all the technical issues we had. Not something that I could predict or try and solve in a reasonable amount of time. As this is the first lecture of anything in the academy, usually we bear the brunt of any problems. So hopefully next week it goes a lot smoother. So you do have until 5:05 to sit in the venue and carry on your practical. But if you don't feel like that, it's getting a bit warm in here, want to leave, you're perfectly fine to leave. Just make sure that on Friday before class, before 10:30, you submit practical 0. Okay, so if you do have any questions, me and Mrs. Dunga will be available in the venue. If there's questions on Discord, I will try and answer, on Blackboard, I will try and answer them now. Otherwise, thank you. That's it for the lecture.